Today we're going to be interviewing Lou Dunkin, who has an incredible life, and also joining us is Karen Stram, her daughter. Lou, almost 3 months ago, you had your 105th birthday. How did that feel?
How did it feel?
Uh-huh.
Same as the day before.
Do you have any words of wisdom that came from the 105 years?
I'm asked that question a lot, and I always say hard work. We worked really hard. I've carried a lot of bricks and lumber backing Lyle up. So, and it gives you good strength, which everybody's going to a gym now to get it. So, I just worked hard.
You were a real team, weren't you?
I loved building and seeing the process of creation. So, stack of lumber turn into something useful or gorgeous.
And I remember you're saying that you thought that Lyle had been born with sap in his veins and a hammer in his hand.
Right, probably was a difficult birth.
And you did a lot of the design work, didn't you, on all the houses that you built during the years?
I usually probably had the better concept of it to start with.
You had the eye.
Mm-hmm.
Today we're going to talk mainly about the time that you and Lyle spent in Stillicum. And I know that was two different times. And you first came in 1949. It was determined that he was going to be head of the carpentry shop at McNeil Island Penitentiary. Where were you going to live when you ended up in Stillicum?
Had it mind to live in South Tacoma. And after we saw South Tacoma, we moved farther south, came to Stillicum.
And how did you find a house there, or a place to live?
Wasn't easy because this was right after the war. And first thing we did was we had a little one-wheel trailer that we hauled stuff in. And it was hooked on the car, so wheeled into the side door of the E.R. Rogers house, and it was a Friday afternoon. School was out. That was the end of the school year. So Karen and Judy got acquainted with a boy and a girl, Myra and Bubba, and they had lived in Texas, and that's where we came from. So they were going to go to some school doings that night for the end of school. So the kids went off with them, and we started trying to locate a place to light, hopefully permanently, but it was not easy. So the mother of Myra and Bubba lived in a little house where the apartments are now.
Behind the bear store.
Went in the bear store to ask about a place to live after we pulled into the parking spot on the side. And Dosha Leach was postmistress that year. They swapped. I think it was according to the politics. The Democrat was president that year. Then we had a we had a Democrat postmistress or master, because I think, what was her husband's name?
Bill.
Bill?
Bill, yeah. And he was a Republican.
Oh, was that the order? I never did bother to find out. So she said, well, it's tough, but you might ask at that little house behind the store here, and I know she has rented the E.R. Rogers and for a place for her kids to live. She, I guess, didn't want them in the house with her. So anyway, I asked her about a place to live, and she had rented the E.R. Rogers and had rented out places so her kids could use that to sleep in. And so upstairs she had a little old lady, and then in the back part of the house on the first floor was a sailor or a soldier and his wife and baby. And he came home drunk one night, and that was good for health and entertainment. But anyhow, she decided that she would rent to us, and she had the downstairs empty. So we moved some things, but not all of our stuff, into the downstairs, the E.R. Rogers. And what do you know? We moved in one weekend, and the following Wednesday, we had an earthquake. So we thought it was a pretty good welcome. So anyway, it was interesting watching the cars go up and down. The bumpers were...
Had you ever been in an earthquake before?
Not in Kansas. No, Kansas didn't have earthquakes. So that was my first experience, but I enjoyed it. I mean, might as well enjoy it.
Well, tell us about the rooms at the E.R. Rogers. You shared a kitchen, was it?
We shared the kitchen with this soldier and his wife, because there was only the one kitchen. It was very loose jointed and not very satisfactory arrangement, but any port in a storm, and it was pretty bad to try to find something you could just move into, lock, stock, and barrel, and settle. So we didn't live there very long. But our first real estate move was a fellow named Samuelson had a barn up on Marietta Street, and it was sturdy. It had 2-inch car decking floors, and and it had double doors on the front, so you just drive a car in and repair it in there. So we saw potential in that because it had nice Dutch colonial lines. And so first thing off the bat, we bought the thing. I don't know what we paid for it, probably $2,500. That seemed to be a kind of a standard number. But anyway, we moved into there.
Before it was finished?
Oh, yeah. No, it was great, but they had a blizzard along
January 1950. Friday the
our
13th.
anniversary, as a matter of fact. Yeah, well, I practically crawled home from the boat through the snow because it was pretty thick. But then he'd get home and he had to get the blowtorch and go into the house and thaw the water pipes. So, but the barn turned out a very livable and adaptable, and so It was an interesting house because with it came some interesting glass. There were several pieces of curved glass, kind of a big curve like this, and big enough it could be a window. So we had a curved glass window.
Had it been an aquarium? Did he have aquarium equipment there? Do you recall?
Well, they did have an aquarium because all the rooms were all insulated, heavily insulated with sawdust. And I know the kids and I loaded the sawdust out of that room and dumped it over the bank in the back. So
why did you leave that house?
General Keeler at, I think it was Madigan, bought it. And we had, meanwhile, I wanted to get close to the boat so he could drink his coffee and then go to the boat post haste. So we decided we'd buy a lot and build a house. And to buy a lot was not easy. We decided what we wanted, and it turned out everybody says, well, you can't buy that. But as it turned out, we went to the door, knocked on the door, asked them if they were going, thinking about selling it. They were on the floor in the living room painting a for sale sign. So we just bought a lot diagonal across from the little house, and that worked out beautifully. We built what I call a Frank Lloyd Wright house, and the town called it Chicken House. It was unstillicum. We should have been run out of town. It was a flat top, and it is still there. It was a very nice house, livable.
It was on 7th Street, just above the dock.
Right, it was. Lyle could sit there at the dining room table and drink his coffee, and they gave it a last little toot, and he was out the door. So that worked well.
Karen, did you work on that house at all? Do you remember?
Oh, sure.
What were you doing?
My pulling nails. My dad never threw anything away. So whenever he took something apart, Judy and I got to pull all the nails out of it so that it could be reused. And I don't know if it was that house, but one of the houses I nailed my foot to the floor, to the ceiling at the roof.
No, that was the church.
Well, yeah. Well, right.
Yeah, they went on a work party for a church and were.
That was in college.
So the whole family was usually involved in whatever the house was that you were building or restoring at that time. Is that right?
Yeah.
So, okay, the girls were in school and you were helping Lyle when he wasn't working on McNeil. So did you do anything as far as PTA or anything like that when you were in Stillwater?
I'm not a PTA mother. No. They were doing just fine, and I could care less.
You tried.
Mm-hmm.
You tried. Remember when the big field behind the old school was woods and a stream, and we did a day camp.
It was Girl Scouts or something like that.
Right. It wasn't PTA, but it was, you were a mother.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Oh yeah. Well, I remember that little. It was kind of a willowy, brushy.
With the water
Yeah.
base, you know.
So
Okay, in 1949, there probably were around 1,500 people in Steilacoom at that time. So what did you think of Steilacoom as a little town?
Gosh, I was focused on house. So I didn't really think in terms of a town.
Uh-huh. Okay, after Stillicum, in 1956, you left because Lyle went to California to Terminal Island,
Mm-hmm.
and then 2 years later, you went to Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
So, did you build a house in Washington, D.C.?
Sure did.
How was that?
That was exciting. We had another big snow. So the snow fell, and we had a basement hole dug ready to add. Actually, it was a package house called the Texan, and they are a lot of prefab units. Then you put them all together, and you got a house. Snowed, and we had this basement hole dug, and it filled with snow. So the fire department came and pumped it out, which I don't think they do nowadays. Oh, and then the footings, they wouldn't pass code. I was waiting for the concrete truck to come, and the guys were going to do the work were sitting up on a pile of logs, and they were just lazy as all get out. So I went to the hardware store and got a shovel and went and tried to doctor up the footings to get them closer to code. But anyway, it all worked out.
So you built the house.
Oh, that was a nice house too. Package or no, it was large.
And Lyle was working with the Justice Department in the Bureau of Prisons, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you were there for President Kennedy's inauguration?
Actually, the Bureau of Prisons was in the HOLC building, which is just off Capitol, well, sort of on the edge of Capitol Hill, but looked down on Constitution Avenue. And so they got to watch the inauguration from there. It was so cold. They were so lucky to be indoors. I think I was on the street, but oh my gosh, it was cold. But that was pretty neat to be there. I think January is always cold there, actually.
So you were at a party with Robert Kennedy, who was Attorney General at that time. And you have a picture of...
Oh, yeah.
So what happened at that party?
Oh, well, the director of the Bureau was going to resign, and so somebody along the line decided to bake him a cake, and they baked a knife in it so he could get out, I guess. Lyle liked Bobby's wife.
Ethel?
He thought she was just okay.
They had decided, and you can pick up any time, but they had decided that instead of just repairing furniture, that maybe the prison industries would actually build a line of upscale furniture of their own and use it in the federal offices. And it was going to be in the federal judiciary that they were going to use it. And so, of course, all of these circuit judges and all of that were going to be using the furniture, but she was interested in that, I think, and
Ethel was.
Ethel, and had Dad out.
Okay, so after this particular time, then you moved back to Stillicum in 1965, and picking up on what you were saying, Karen, then Lyle's new title was Superintendent of Industries because of that furniture that he and his skills in carpentry. And I have you quoted as saying, "We lived another whole lifetime and had a new career after we made the move back to Stillicum." I think that you and Lyle saw that there were changes in the town, and so he decided to get into politics, and then...
Well, he was drafted.
Okay,
He
tell
is
us
not
about
a
it.
political soul, but
So who drafted him and how did it work?
Well, I think it was up at Trish and Don's, and they decided an election was coming up, and they were fed up with George Salzer, so they decided to run Lyle against Salzer, and that's when those brown signs started appearing. They appeared all over town in one night, in the dark of night. So when Salzer got up the next morning, everywhere he looked were these signs. He was easy to beat.
Overwhelmed. And you may recall we had the Terrible 12.
Oh, a secret group.
Right. And we met because we wanted to defeat Salzer because historic preservation was becoming interesting. And so the 12 of us met in secret for months and months trying to plan who we would want. We wanted Lyle for mayor and then other people to serve on the council too.
Judge Kennedy come into the picture somewhere along the line here, and believe me, things got a lot nicer, prettier, and everything.
So before Lyle became mayor, and you mentioned going to Trish and Don Laughlin's, who they were kind of the ones who instigated the historic preservation, and then you and Lyle really picked up on it, so that I think the four of you were what really got the historic district going. Yeah. And you went to Petaluma, didn't you?
Yes. I think Lyle wanted to bring things to a screeching halt, the way they were going, and it coincided with a trip we made to California, and we stopped in a little town called Petaluma, and they were going through the same change pains that we were. They wanted to do some pretty radical law changing. When we got home from Petaluma, Lyle went to the town attorney.
Ed Wheeler.
Yeah, right. Well, if you pass a law and it turns out not to be legal, so you haven't lost a thing and you've gained some time. So that's what they did. Lyle introduced a moratorium on all further construction in Stillicum, and I don't think it was very popular, but with some people, but with other people, it was a big sigh of relief.
I want to interject there, Lou, in that what also was happening, as you recall, was Stillicum had sewers and Lakewood did not. And so builders were coming to Stillicum looking for land to develop, and that's when Lyle decided that the council needed to declare a moratorium, because there was an old house, the Smith house, that had been torn down across from the Orr home, and that kind of was what got everything going as far as this moratorium. And that gave us time to put together a historic district, the moratorium did, so that when it was lifted, and I think it was a 2-year process, and then the town had things in codes in place and so forth, so to protect us. Stillicum was very lucky to have Lyle as mayor at that particular time. And remember the called Save Old Stillicum? Mm-hmm. And that was kind of, let's save the historic district in Stillicum so that it would be retained. About this time, Lyle was mayor, and then the museum got the Bear Store. So what happened then as far as Lyle was concerned?
We went through the store and called out things that were not store stock, and had a what do you call it, sale?
Garage sale.
Garage sale in the tennis court. And
you were chair of that, didn't you? Weren't you in charge?
yeah, we charged people to get into the sale. We were out for bucks. Anyway, we could have made more, I think.
But made over $6,000, so
Did
that
we?
was pretty good.
Well, wasn't to be sneezed at.
Yeah.
So at what point did they decide to actually restore the drugstore instead of tear it down and just start from scratch?
That's right. They wanted to tear down the Bear store, and what was holding the store up was a tree long out there. I hadn't thought about that for a long time.
Do you remember the floors?
The forge?
The floors.
I remember the floors.
Oh, yes. Yeah. It's funny, Laura Putnam's grandchildren would go into the Bear store, and of course it had been built by placing stones and then planking across it for floor. And of course over time it had rotted, so the floor went like this, and the kids would go in there and run from one hill to the other, say, "And come over here, it's steeper over here."
So as I recall, Lyle was mayor at that point, and the museum had received the Bear store, donated from Cub and Eudocia, the children of W.L. Bear. And so Lyle asked the association if he could work on restoring it, because you're right, it was either tear it down or restore it.
Mm-hmm.
And so Lyle was the one that instigated the restoration of the Bear store.
You had to save things that would add to the character of the store, like wash boilers. I doubt if kids know what a wash boiler is now. And then there were a lot of little drawers about this big. I guess they're still there.
They are, that held evidently the hardware type of things with nails and
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
So Lyle and Lynn Scholes were really the two people that really did it.
Glenn was kind of the front man. He'd stand out in front, tell everybody what was going on and why it was going on, what they could do to help.
Good fundraising.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, and then the Army of Engineers came in and really helped to lift up the building.
That's right.
Remember that?
And then they put in a regular floor.
Poured cement.
Mm-hmm. Or Cub's dad, I guess,
WL.
built that store a long time ago.
1895, actually.
Yeah.
So, okay, the store was finished, and we dedicated it during the country's bicentennial. We had a big party, and Lyle was mayor. And tell us about Pioneer Park.
Oh, yes. We tried to get a lease, the town to get a lease on the open space in front of the E.R. Rogers, looking out over the sound. And of course it was blackberry bushes and everything you can think of, but it also was kind of a possible site for artifacts left over from all the activities that had gone on since the town really was settled. Oh, Charlie, he brought his bulldozer and he cleared that site of all that brush, graded it, and there it was, a nice, pretty site. But we tried to get a lease from the railroad, and the railroads are hard to deal with.
So after it was bulldozed and leveled, and then what did you do? Did you planted grass? Had grass planted?
Yes, and we got a tree up from Oregon that had come across the plains, and I don't know which tree it is now.
I think that you had a graft from the Sweet Summer Paradise that was also in the orchard. And unfortunately, later, someone dug that up and took it away. But there are still old apple trees there that you had planted.
Well, Lyle made a graft off of that original stock.
From the orchard.
Right, and did it on the barn at the house on 2nd or 1st of May. And I gave you the pictures.
Yes, I have that. So
pretty good looking apples.
They are.
I thought.
So during the bicentennial, the Pioneer Park was dedicated, and we have a picture with you and Lyle and Don Laughlin and Alice Watson, who were the co-chair of the bicentennial celebration. So, and the park is still there, and it's lovely, and people really enjoy it today.
They do.
Wonderful. So when Lyle was mayor for those 8 years, what do you think was his greatest accomplishment?
I didn't pay too much attention, but it was a group involved in dealing with Bonneville,
Yeah.
Electrical County, that they provided the town with electricity, and Lyle went to their meetings, and he was able to get town electricity cheaper. And I think we still have that today.
Mm-hmm. So along with that, though, he promoted the aspect of underground wiring.
Right. Yeah, he wanted to do that.
And that makes this historic district and town very special because the views were part of Steilacoom. Okay, what was the other accomplishment that Lyle did that you really thought was special?
The community center, of course. That was, I can't say it was a struggle, but it always requires a good bit of effort to make any major change.
Right, and it was during that time, I think, that Ray Egan was part of the town as a grant writer, and he was really instrumental in that, wasn't he? As far as getting the community center, the monies. But then you played a major role in that too, didn't you? Work with the design of the building?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I couldn't resist that. Yeah, and actually I knew the architect because he and I both were on the Arts Commission.
Right.
So we just, actually I think we had meetings and asked the people what they wanted, things like that.
I think the community center has been one of those very special places in our community that has really been a nucleus for bringing the town together too. And so you had a lot to do with that. And
Oh,
Lyle,
yeah,
of course, did too.
anything building like that, I'm gonna get my finger in the pie.
Right. So after Lyle retired as mayor, then you started building houses again, right?
That's pretty
Short Street. On Short Street.
Short Street, yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah. That was a very efficient house and the people love it.
But you moved out of it.
Well, out and upward. I think we moved up here from there.
No, you went right across the street to where Kennedy's lived. You built that one.
Yeah, that's right. Sit there in the one house and look, and I owned the lot across the street, so sit there, drink coffee and figure out what kind of a house would work on that house, on that lot. The Kennedys like their house, I guess.
They're still there.
Yeah.
So then you moved further up the hill, kind of next to the property you have now. And then you moved down to Main Street.
That's right, we moved up here. That was a super spot. Good house, too.
And you felt that was your favorite house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The burglars broke into that house and stole my souvenir from Greece.
And your silverware. Wasn't it your silverware
Oh,
too?
that's right. Yes. You know, when Lyle and I were married, his dad had been, his dad's dad had been a watchmaker in Ohio, and Lyle had a lot of his tools and stuff, but he had a silver pocket watch that had my maiden name in it, which is not Jones, and
It was what?
it was Berquin, and that's a pretty unusual name. And it had this little silver watch with my name engraved in the back of it. And France and Switzerland do make lots of watches. So, but anyway, he gave me the watch. And that was the thing they stole.
One of the houses that you did not build but restored was the Bulge House.
Right.
And can you tell me about that one, right?
It was on the state
Endangered
historic
list?
preservation list to demolish. All right. And so we must have bought it.
The whole plot. There were several. What ended up being several.
I think there were 4 lots.
Yeah, 4 lots in there.
Yeah.
And brought it down to street level.
But anyway, that house, we moved. And that entertained the town for a while. Had put it up on dollies and dollied it out and stopped traffic and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, that was fun. But we had people come from up north of Seattle, to want to dig for artifacts, things that might be buried in the soil when it's churned up. I can't remember if it was found anything or not.
But you let them come?
Oh, sure. But that, well, see the piece of marble? That was under that house.
Intact, that not cracked or anything, just there.
We had it doctored up, cut to size to fit the old base. So.
And the house was built in 1857, as I recall. So.
Yeah. And I think the gal that's there has done quite a bit of remodeling even since then.
You and Lyle loved challenges.
Well, we just love to build.
You always had strong feelings, Lou. And so you would write letters to the editors often.
Oh, yeah. If I thought something needed that was going the wrong way, I let them know.
Right.
You know, most people don't. They're not concerned with whether they build rental houses in the golf course up here. So somebody's got to speak up.
Right. Well, I think people always enjoyed reading your letters, and sometimes they would agree with you, and sometimes they wouldn't. Remember any particular issues that when you were writing these letters? Was there anything special that you would write about?
I don't know. Karen was reminding me that I wrote.
Well, you wrote a letter about the Simpson Bowles Act or study proposal and sent Al Simpson a copy of the letter that you had written, and he sent a note back thanking her for the support. And and oh, by the way, he knows the area well. His uncle was just across at the island. In good Al Simpson style.
Well, now, I don't really know about Al Simpson.
Oh, he's just a Wyoming senator, U.S. senator, but just had a wonderful character.
Right.
Just.
And you knew him from Washington, D.C.?
No, actually, he was. We thought it was a very practical proposal that the Simpson Bowles had done, and why weren't they somebody doing something about it?
Right.
So I think he just appreciated the fact that somebody cared enough to agree. Yeah, but always enjoyed watching him.
You mentioned when you were here in the late 40s that you were on a committee to get the margarine changed.
Oh, yeah,
Tell me about that.
Well, up until that time, I don't know why we didn't just have butter, but anyway, margarine was white and looked like lard. And so they'd give you a little pellet and you'd break that and then you'd blend it all through this margarine. And the farmers got into the act because they didn't want, well, they were looking out for the butter. They wanted butter.
You were canvassing for signatures to get this on the ballot.
Oh, that's how I got mixed up with Rasmussen.
Right.
Slim started the initiative.
Well, I was mayor and so forth. Then you went on to Fort Steilacoom. Now, how did that happen, that you got involved with the Fort Steilacoom restoration?
Well, you know Caroline Galacci.
Yeah.
Yeah, well.
And you were on the Pierce County Landmark Committee, weren't you? You're chair for a while, also. So was that? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I was appointed by the then mayor, Slim Rasmussen.
Okay. So then you and Caroline got Lyle involved in the Fort Steilacoom restoration?
I think that was more Caroline Galacci.
Okay.
Yeah. Of course, she was the county preservation officer.
Right. So then you were also involved with Lyle in the restoration, but he did a lot of the planning for restoring the 4 buildings. Is that right?
He got a bunch of retirees that were bored, and I say a bunch, I think there might have been 5 of them, and they, it was kind of like a men's club. they'd drink coffee and chew the fat, and then they'd work. And they really preserved those buildings over there.
So you and Lyle received some awards for the work that you and he had done on the buildings, as I recall.
And I guess we did. State
State
something
awards.
or other.
Mhm.